It's the same thing when we're crocheting with wire. So once again, we've got our crochet hook, and this time I've got some wire. I'm using, I think it's 26 gauge wire. If it's any thicker than 26, then it's often probably too hard to actually crochet with. So 26, 28, 30 gauge wire would be the best to use. So we're starting once again by creating that slip knot. So going over the 2 fingers and bringing it back, crossing it over. Once again, the crochet hook goes underneath that top right hand thread, hooks onto the wire opposite it, and you pull it through. So once again, you need to pull it through, sort of twist it around and pull it tight. So you don't want to pull it too tight, because then we won't be able to. So obviously it's a little bit harder to do this with wire than it is with the yarn, but it is possible. So what did we do? We went over the top of the wire and we loop it through, or you hook it through and pull it through that stitch, or through that loop. And once again, pulling it through. So this is just creating that first row, that first chain stitch row, the first chain. Pulling it through. So we're putting it on the top and then underneath, hooking it, pulling it through. So I'm just going to do one more stitch and then we'll start the next row. So there you can see that you've got all of those loops. So it looks like a chain. And what we do now is we're going to turn back down this row. So this is that first loop, so we go into the very next one, so the one that doesn't have the stitch already in it, and we pulling it through. So we'll have the 2 stitches, or the 2 loops there on the hook, and now we're bringing it through both of those. We go into the next loop, hook it through, so remembering not to go too tight, so we're keeping it nice and loose. And the bigger the hook you have, so this is a 3.5, the bigger your loops will be. So if you had a really fine wire, you might end up using a hook that was much finer, and then the holes in there will also be much finer. So pulling it through, and now going through those 2 loops. So now we go into the next stitch, and we're hooking it underneath, pulling it through the 2. And now we're going to go into our last stitch, which was our first one, hooking it underneath, and pulling it through. So remember what we did with the yarn, we're going to do the same thing with the wire. So we have to do an extra stitch, then we turn it around, and then we're going back the other way. So put the hook into that into that hole. So we've got those 2 stitches again over the top, those 2 pieces of yarn, going through one and then through both. And then we're going through the next stitch, and pulling it through one and then through both into the next stitch. Sometimes they can get a bit hard to see where they are, and it doesn't matter so much if, you know, this is just really learning the basics, but you might end up wanting to, you know, go through 2 sometimes, or, you know, you can change it around so that you're creating something, you know, your own type of stitch. You don't have to follow the rules. So I've got to the end, so I'm going to go do my extra stitch so that I can go back again. And see, you can see that it gets quite confusing here, and you know, that's okay, because you might end up with creating something really quite, you know, quite unique to you. Might be a different type of stitch altogether. There's no rules. Okay, so I'll just finish this row, and then yeah, I've already gone and done something a little bit different because I only went through one of the threads there. Because it's not, it doesn't really matter if it's not all even, unless that's the sort of look you're going for, then, you know, you would try and keep the stitches all the same. But in this case, I'm going for something a little bit more random. But I've started off with the basics. Okay, so that's just got to the end there, so you can see that you know, I could keep going on like that and would end up with I could end up with something like a bracelet, which I will show you some more of in the next video.